Well, hello.
Welcome, everybody.
I believe we are live. Thanks for hopping on right at the top of the hour. I think people are still very much joining us. So, in the meantime, I think, Ariana, I'm going to ask you this question too, but everyone, please go ahead and put your responses in the chat. Back to school, like what sort of feeling does that bring up for you?
Excited to see everybody's answers to this. This is actually my first year with having kids in the public school system. So
Okay.
this is a big back to school year for us. We've had lots of starts of new school years as they've gone through different kind of primary schools and that kind of thing, but this one feels different.
hmm Yeah, it's funny when I think of back to school, I can smell the number two pencils. Like it just it's immediate association.
Oh, absolutely. My son the other day was asking me, what is this thing when we saw a pencil sharpener? And I was like, oh man, I guess like one, you've grown up in a different era than me, and two,
Yeah.
you probably need one of those.
Yeah, totally. And I see Selena says anxiety, and I very much feel that too.
A
Um,
great comment. We're going to definitely cover some of that
yeah,
today.
totally. It seems like the trickle of attendees has stopped, so I say let's kick off. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Back to School, Back to Stress, Supporting Mental Health Through the Season's Biggest Transition. My name is Lindsay Hooper. I'll be your moderator for this webinar. So by the end of this session, you'll have an understanding of why these transitions can be so hard on the brain, and why that's not a personal failing, how parents can support an anxious child without absorbing that anxiety themselves. And we're going to offer some tools for students navigating academic pressure and the stress of sort of starting over in a new year. We're really excited to have Ariana Rosenberg with us presenting this webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about her. So, Ariana is a licensed clinical social worker with a background in clinical therapy and a focus on provider success in the mental health field. She earned her Master's of Social Work from Columbia University and has worked with parents and families in her clinical practice. She has experience in private practice as well, where she specialized in crisis, trauma, and perinatal mental health. And she's worked with the International Rescue Committee in Salt Lake City, developing mental health programming for refugees and providing trauma treatment for survivors of violence and torture. Today, Ariana leads Tava Health's provider success team, where she helps clinicians grow their thriving practices. So, welcome, Ariana. And with that, I'm going to hand it off. So, take it away, Ariana.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thanks for that warm welcome. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. So, like Lindsay said, we're talking about back to school, back to stress. And so, here's an agenda for today. We'll be talking about why transitions are hard on the brain, how you can support your child if you're a parent or if you're a teacher in these settings without absorbing anxiety, how to navigate pressure if you're a student without losing yourself. And honestly, navigating pressure is going to apply to everybody as you're in that back to school phase. How you can protect your well-being so you can show up for the people in your life during this season. And then we'll have some closing remarks and discussion. Like Lindsay said, please put questions in the question and answer as you have them come to you. We'll stop throughout the presentation if there are questions that have come up. And if there's time at the end, we'll also have some additional time for questions. So, first, a quick poll. We'd love to see who's joining us today. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What best describes your role as you're heading into this school season? We've got a couple different options here. Just throw it in the chat. Um, A, B, C, D, E, if you're a parent, caregiver, or student, if you're a teacher or school staff member, more than one of these, none of these, or you're just kind of curious. All right, I'm seeing the answers rolling in. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We've got some people who are more than one of these. We've got a lot of parents or caregivers joining us. Um, I can see that we have some people just joining us out of curiosity, and yeah, parent to teenagers and a college student yourself. You've been through this a few times. We've got some teachers and school staff members. Welcome, everyone. So yeah, this presentation is really going to be geared towards all of you, and I think it will help us understand each other in these different roles, and how to support the individuals in our lives within each of these roles as well. So again, whether you are the individual who's packing a lunchbox, and we all know that morning stress out the door, if you're lesson planning, if you're the student that's prepping for the school year, if you're in that back to school season, it asks a lot of us. You're not imagining it. Um, this really isn't a webinar that's about back to school tips. It's a conversation about what this transition actually asks of us mentally and emotionally, and how we can meet it with intention and hopefully a little bit less overwhelm. So, first, we're going to dive into why transitions are hard on the brain. And honestly, this is going to be most transitions, not exclusively back to school, but it is a lot in that back to school phase. So, those back to school transitions are going to pack multiple stressors simultaneously. You've got new routines, you've got social uncertainty, you've got performance pressure, and also the loss of summer flexibility. And our stress response has a few different components. So, feeling stressed about the start of the school year really doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It means that your nervous system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It needs your help to recalibrate. So, I like to walk through why our brain reacts with this stress response system with something called the hand model of the brain. So, I've got my hand right here. So you can see this is my wrist and my palm, and it represents our brainstem. So this is the oldest part of our brain. It's pure survival. It's our breathing, it's our heart rate, it's keeping us awake. It's constantly scanning the environment and asking a simple question, am I safe? Then you have the amygdala, which is our alarm system. So this thumb represents our limbic system, specifically the amygdala. It's our brain's emotional center. It's our internal fire alarm. And when the new school routine feels very overwhelming, it's the part of our brain that senses danger and prepares us to like fight, flight, flee, freeze. So, and then we've got our prefrontal cortex. So I'm folding that over here. These fingers represent our prefrontal cortex, which is our logical, rational thinking part of our brain. It handles all of the problem solving that happens, empathy, emotional regulation, making good choices. This is the part of the brain that we like most frequently need in our modern day era. But our brain is still wired in kind of this like threat detection system. So, um, our thinking brain here is hugging our emotional brain. It's keeping it calm and regulated. But when we go back to school and there's all of these things coming in at us, we've got this like emotional anxiety, our brain flips its lid. So when this happens, our logical thinking brain, it goes offline. We literally lose access to like that reason, that problem solving. Um, and this is why like maybe telling a highly anxious child or an adult, just calm down, be logical. It's okay. Calm down, take a breath. It doesn't always work in that moment. The logical part of the brain is just physically disconnected from the driver's seat, and that threat detection system, the anxiety, the amygdala, that fire alarm is like really driving reactions. So the goal is to help ourselves and our children, and maybe the individuals that you're teaching, if you're a teacher, um, not to prevent the anxiety entirely, it's to kind of help bring that thinking brain back online. So we do this by focusing on physical, emotional safety first, deep breathing, calm tones of voice, reassuring hugs. Those help signal to the alarm system like uh, we can talk through the anxieties of the new school year. We can problem solve together. But a lot of times you're first focusing on meeting the dread, meeting the anxiety, and confirming that the threat is emotional. Let's take a breath together. So the next time, maybe you're heading into the new school year, you notice your child's feeling really overwhelmed by a new routine. You can remember this hand model of the brain. It can help us remind us, like, okay, it's expected a little bit that this morning might be a little bit stressful, that they might react in a way that's atypical for them. We've temporarily lost access to our prefrontal cortex, and you're probably experiencing the same thing. And so it helps take a breath, connect, and kind of help close that lid. Okay, so why it hits hard for every single one of us. For students, you're going through a lot of developmental stress around belonging. Academic performance can feel very overwhelming, and a focus on your identity is really heightened at the start of the school year. Um, for teens, especially, peer evaluation can be really processed as like the brain systems as a physical threat. It feels like you're constantly being evaluated by the people around you. You're going to have anxiety that results in that again, especially at the beginning of the year when all of it is new, a little bit more of that like brain flipping the lid. For parents, we're managing the emotional labor of a child's anxiety while managing your own. And that's tough, right? You're trying to present in a way, you're trying to show up for them in a way that's not full of stress, but it's hard, right? And so there's a lot of research on this, and parental anxiety spilling over shows that children do absorb and mirror some of that parental stress response. And then teachers, there's a lot of anticipatory stress before a new school year begins. There can be ambiguity in your role. There can be administrative pressure. Sometimes you're pulling things in from the previous year. You've got to support students with a increasingly complex world of technology, mental health needs, and we've also seen that since the COVID pandemic, teacher burnout rates have really reached historic highs since 2020. I'm going to stop there for a second and see if we've got any questions here about this, like the brain transitions throughout the school year. Lindsay, did we have any questions come in?
No questions have come in, but I do feel like it's a really great thing to understand why our brains do what they do. So thank you. And this is a great reminder. Everyone get your questions in as they come to you. Back to you.
Perfect. All right. So supporting your child without absorbing their anxiety. We just touched on how um, parents can really impact our kids in the way that we present with our own anxiety. It's going to be really normal as a parent to feel anxious and honestly, maybe to feel more anxious than your kid is. Sometimes they're going to go into the new year. They don't always know exactly what's coming for them. And maybe you have other anxieties on top of the ones that they've got. Um, and then sometimes your kid has a lot more anxiety and you don't want to absorb that from them either. So let's talk through a couple of practical tools for this very demanding role of parenting during the beginning of a new school year season. So first, understanding what your child is actually feeling. There's so much that goes into the emotions behind a new school year. So oftentimes with kids, there's going to be a presenting behavior that might be different from what the child is actually feeling. So maybe we've got some clinging, some irritability. There's maybe some physical symptoms, stomach aches, headaches. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to school. Or maybe they're even presenting more calm than normal. They're trying to ease their own anxiety. And then there's going to be something behind that emotion, behind that presenting behavior. There's going to be some emotion there. Maybe there's fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of something new. And a lot of times, children and teens don't have the language for that anxiety, for those fears, for the emotions that they're feeling. And there's often going to be compound emotions when you're heading into a new school year. You've got some excitement, and at the same time, some fear, some nervous energy. And so kids and teens are going to express that through their behavior. And so helping them figure out how to name that, what's going on is a great first intervention. Um, and so this is a good cognitive behavioral therapy tool. There's different questions you can ask. And sometimes it's going to be naming that behavior for them to open up the conversation. So the general idea here is like, what's the worry under the worry, or what's the worry under the behavior, and trying to pull out that core fear beneath the surface complaint of the stomach ache, or uh, I don't want to go today, or like, can't you come with me, or can you walk me in, or whatever it is. So something like, I noticed you seemed a little blank. Insert the emotion here. Like, I noticed your stomach was hurting. Maybe you're feeling nervous about school starting. And I think it can feel a little nerve-wracking sometimes to name the emotion for your kid. Like, what if I get it wrong? Are they going to be offended? But honestly, I think it's okay. If you get it totally wrong, it just opens the door for them to tell you more about what actually is going on. And so starting with something like that, taking a guess, what would you be feeling in that moment? Can you think back to how you felt in school? What were the things that usually came up for you? All right. As parents, we often also want to help our kids in these uncomfortable spots where they're growing, they're learning, and there's a huge instinct to kind of help eliminate discomfort along the way. And it comes from a very loving place. However, when you're consistently removing the growth that can happen through the resistance, through the difficulties, um, it will actually be counterintuitive and unhelpful. Avoiding the difficult thing is going to prevent our nervous system from learning that the feared outcome is survivable. So again, when we go back to that hand model of the brain, our brain flips its lid because we feel anxiety and we're anxious about something. We feel like there's an external threat coming towards us. Um, this was very helpful when a lion was chasing us. It's not so helpful when you're in school and you're talking to somebody new, or your teacher asks you a question in front of the class and all of a sudden your brain flips its lid, right? Like that's not super helpful. It's not super helpful when your kid says, I won't put on my shoes, and you're like, what am I supposed to do to get you out the door so you can make it to school on time? Not helpful in those situations. And so, um, for each of us, having some of that gradual exposure, small supportive steps towards the situation is the best approach to reduce the anxiety. So, still going to school and trying to answer questions, trying to raise your hand in class, trying to do the thing that makes you feel a little bit nervous in a safe way can help reduce the anxiety. And I think as parents, this can be one of the hardest things because you're watching your kids do something that you know is hard, that they're uncomfortable with. But if you remove it from them, they won't learn how to get through it. They won't reduce the anxiety around it. And so finding ways to help them approach it in small, safe, approachable ways is very helpful. So the parent's role here is not to remove the hard thing. It's to be a calm, confident presence and communicate. I believe you can handle this. I believe that you can do this hard thing. I've heard a variety of individuals who work in this kind of parenting, mental health related space talk about how they use this with their own kids. Maybe it's something like you've got a toddler who's not sleeping well and they're scared of the dark at night, and saying, I believe that you are capable of dealing with that feeling, that really hard feeling. I know that you are brave and that you can be strong, and I'm going to close the door now, but I believe that you can do this, and giving them that reassurance. And then that goes into school too. I know going to school and making new friends is hard, but I've seen you do hard things before. I think you can make new friends, and I'm here after school to talk about it too. I'd love to hear from each of you. Um, if you've ever used this kind of thing with your kid, if you've seen any of your kids, I know we have a lot of parents in the chat. Feel free to jump in and tell me about a time where maybe you've used something like this, um, if you've seen this with your own kids. And then while we're seeing if anybody's got any experiences to share, Lindsay, do we have any questions?
No questions currently.
Perfect. And we've got someone saying that this does seem like something that's a useful tool, that I believe in you. I've seen you do this before, has been helpful. Absolutely. Yeah, I think some of that reassurance. I mean, think about how we would feel in our adult lives when somebody says something like that, when you're dealing with a complicated problem at work, or when you're dealing with a complicated problem in your own life, and having someone that you trust being able to tell you, I believe in you. I've seen you do this before. It's reassuring. It's like, okay, I'm not feeling that way right now, but because you are, it's really helpful for me to say, like, yeah, I can do. Somebody else believes in me, and that helps me kind of buoy up some of my strength myself. We've got another comment. I asked them to remember a time they handled a situation that made them feel that way before and to remind them that they have done it before. I love that. I think that's a great example of helping them recall times when they've been able to be strong themselves, or they've been able to handle difficult situations, even if they didn't feel strong, which is okay, right? There's so many times when we don't feel strong when we're in the growth space. All right. Validation without accommodation. So this is very similar to what we just talked about. Being able to talk with your kids and like hear them out, and not just saying, you can do it, you can make it through this. Those are important things too. But also saying, I hear you. This feels really big. That sounds really hard. A lot of times in those in these types of situations with your kids, They just need someone to say, like, yes, this is a hard thing, full stop, and let that sit. It's so easy to want to jump in and like try and help them either avoid it or push them through it. We do want to help give them the strength to make it through some of these tough things. Um, but we want to avoid changing plans to prevent children from experiencing discomfort, excessive reassurance, seeking loops, or avoidance of feared situations. I think an important thing here too is every kid's situation is going to be different. Every kid's going to have different levels of anxiety. Maybe there's going to be some real things that happened with some children in the past that do need accommodation, right? And so being able to validate and really hear out our kids allows us to differentiate between those situations. So our most helpful response is usually going to hold both. Acknowledge the feeling. That sounds really hard. It's difficult to start a new school year and maintaining the expectation. We're going to school tomorrow and we're going to make it through this together. We talked about some of this research on parents' regulation and how the impact of our own nervous system and our own anxiety impacts our children. This is true with regulating our emotions as well. So, research on co-regulation shows that a parent's regulated nervous system can directly help to regulate a child's. You cannot help co-regulate from a place of dysregulation. That's going to usually amplify the situation. And so recognizing your own emotions around the school year, the potential of stress impacting you is going to be helpful. So some strategies for parents, name your own stress before any kind of school drop-off situation or conversation. Have a decompression plan for after drop off and resist the urge to over check in during the school day. You might be able to check in once, or make sure your kid knows that they can check in with you or that kind of thing. Um, but having a plan going into it can help with any of that dysregulation. We'll also talk through some ways to manage anxiety, some coping skills in the next few minutes. So again, name your own stress, have a decompression plan for drop off, and sharing those things with your kids is going to be really helpful. If you can say like, hey, this is something that works for me, this might work for you too. Or having a plan for after the school day. Hey, when you get home, we're going to have this snack ready. Maybe it's some kind of special after school day routine that you have. And that can help with easing that transition when there's something that they can rely on. And a couple of tools that you can use with your kids and take home with you. A lot of times, children are coming home depleted, especially after a big school day. They've been around peers all day long, they've been around um, teachers, new teachers, they've been in new classes. It's a full day where their brain is just constantly stimulated, learning new things and trying new things and adjusting to this new routine. So, a large question like how was school can be really hard to answer for kids. Parts of it might have been good, parts of it might have been confusing, parts of it might have been bad. So more specific questions simplify the answers for your kids. Um, and you can kind of scale these kinds of questions based on the ages of your kids. So, what was one good moment today? Might be a good question for your elementary school aged children or for your middle school children. Um, it may also be a good one for high school age children. Your high school age children may be going back to a school they're familiar with or friends they're familiar with. So you can ask really specific questions about the types of classes they're in. You might know the exact layout of their class schedule, and you can pull out which classes they attended today. What did you think of your new history teacher? Did you have any friends in your classes? Did you get to see XYZ friend today? Maybe they're involved in some particular extracurricular, and you can ask about that specifically. What was one hard moment today? Did something make you laugh today? Tell me something you're proud of from today. I know with my younger kids, I'll say something like, did you go to the park today? A really specific, it's like a yes or no question, not open-ended, but it can usually lead to open-ended questions. Um, Even with young kids, 4 or 5 years old, I will sometimes get, when I say, how was school? Ugh, I'm not answering that question, Mom. And so I think being able to be more specific can be really helpful. Yeah, I see someone saying that they struggle with this with their teen? Absolutely. I honestly think it's so difficult sometimes, even with the best questions, you're still going to be met with some resistance because you are your child's safe space. It's like they came home from school, they didn't need to be on anymore, they didn't have to answer questions anymore. They need a second to take a breath. And that's so hard when you're like, oh, I've been like anxiously thinking about you all day long. I want to know how the day went. I want to hear everything. Um, and then no matter what, they just say, yeah, it was okay. It was fine. Don't ask me that, mom. Um, yeah, we've got Jack saying for my elementary age kid, I ask about recess, what they did, who they played with, exactly. And that can be a great way to start, like zero in on the things you suspect your kid probably liked today, or maybe something you knew they were excited about. And then sometimes that'll open up the door to other things. Um, and then if you can kind of get them rolling, talking in their own way, that can be really useful. And another big thing here is trust yourself as the parent. You know your kid, you know their behaviors, you know how they usually interact with you, you know what gets them talking, you know what really doesn't get them talking, and kind of plan some of those things into your after school day. Sometimes I ask things like, who did you sit with at lunch? Or did something funny happen today? Absolutely. I love those questions. And again, I think we really lean into open-ended questions. Those are great. Try those, of course, because it can allow them to answer how they want. But sometimes yes or no questions can just like get the conversation started or questions with simple answers. Did you have any classes with your friend Lauren? Something like that. It's like, okay, they can get started thinking through their day. They might share more information. I find that if I ask questions, I seem pushy. If I don't say anything, she spills the tea. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Carrie. Absolutely. Don't feel like you have to ask questions. Again, trust yourself. You know your kid. And so that's the biggest thing to rely on. All right. Let's see. I think, do we have any questions, Lindsay, at this point?
Yes, I think a question just came in. Um, how do you communicate with your senior students that are mostly shut out most days? It
Yeah.
sounds like teenagers who don't really want to share. I think we've all been those teenagers before.
We've probably all been those teenagers. We remember that. Now our brains are more developed and we're like, why didn't I talk to the people in my life, right? And then we also have interacted with those teenagers. And it's a hard phase, especially with your teenagers who are closed off. They don't want to have conversations with you. They don't want to answer questions. Any question gets them on edge. And so I think there's a couple of things here. Like one, do what you can to be available. Sometimes as the person again that's like most trusted in their life, you are the one that they can be silent around. And so try and take the silence with a grain of salt of like, I will be here with them, even in the silence. I will be here with them and make sure they know that. Hey, if you want to talk, I'm here. And also, if not, I'm here. We'll still be sitting here eating together. We'll still be sitting here doing this thing together. And I think the other thing is like opening up opportunities where they could talk. And so it doesn't mean that you're necessarily forcing the question, but that you're spending time together or that you've got some curated moments where talking sometimes happens with them. Getting outside and walking can be really helpful for getting your brain moving and getting talking happening. This is a well-researched thing. And so sometimes it could be like maybe you suggest that you go out and get ice cream and you know that you park a little further away from the ice cream shop so that you've got to walk in if like just going out and a walk outside doesn't feel quite as natural for you. Um, I think that another thing that you can do is try some of these open-ended questions, maybe before the school day. Check in and say, hey, I really would love to hear what's happening after the school day today. Can you give me a question that you would be okay with me asking and have some conversation around it? Though they might cringe, right? Like they might say, oh, I don't want to talk to you about it, or like, oh, nothing, or like ask if there's a word that they can tell you if they really don't want to talk in that moment. Um, and then a word when they do want to talk so that you can kind of be aware and available. A lot of times our teenagers will meet us with appreciation in those moments because you're putting the power in their hands of like they get to choose when they're going to talk and when they're not. Transition moments can be really big for teenagers. We can't always be there for transition moments, but trying to bake in sometimes where you can be there for transition moments can be helpful as well. All
Great,
right.
thank you. That's the only question we've gotten so far.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, and navigating pressure without losing yourself. There's so many big things that are part of the start of year mental load. So we're going to talk through a couple of tools that you can use and where some of this load comes from. So the start of a new school year is going to carry a lot of pressure. It's going to be pressure to perform academically, belong socially, appear effortless doing it, all while adjusting to this new schedule, new environment, new expectations. Um, that's a lot for students to handle. It's a lot for little kids and their brains that are still very much in the process of developing, and also high school students whose brains are still developing too. For many students, it's the anxiety isn't necessarily about the school itself. It's about everything that it represents, everything that's baked into a new school year, comparison, judgment, fear of not measuring up. Um, there's really a lot that can come into a new school year that children carry with them. So, one thing that I think is important as a student, and if you're a parent or a teacher, is to help your kids recognize that their identity is not tied to performance. In many areas of the world, academic performance is going to be a huge stressor as you're entering the school year. It's a big deal now. There's so many new things happening in schools now with adjustments in technology, a lot of pressure for performance, to be in extracurriculars, to do the things that will help you get into university programs. And so it's really easy for teens and young children to tie academic performance to a measure of worth. Um, I live in a pretty high pressure area, and when talking to teenagers this summer about what they were doing, the number one answer I got was going to ACT camps, was prepping for the SATs, spending all day studying. I mean, you've got stuff like this that teenagers are experiencing every day, and um, and it's really easy to tie your worth to your performance. So the adolescent and young adult brain is still developing. The prefrontal cortex is not fully formed until age 25, and it's really highly susceptible to fusing identity with outcomes. And honestly, even once your brain is fully developed, this is something that many of us experience growing up. And so, likely as a parent, you have some of this tied in for you too. So here's a tool from a therapy modality called ACT, helping disconnect some of that academic performance from identity. You are not your grade. You are not your social standing. You are the person experiencing those things. And helping individuals, your children, kids in your classrooms, if you're a student yourself, appreciate that your identity is not tied into all of these uh, measures that we sometimes pull in for measures of worth. And here's a couple of tools that we can use for grounding ourselves, for managing anxiety. So we're going to actually practice these together for the next couple of minutes. So I'll walk you through the first one, and then we'll try that one, and then we'll do a little bit of box breathing as well. So grounding when overwhelm hits. These are things that you can do anywhere. You can be sitting in a classroom and no one around you needs to notice that you're doing it. You can be sitting on a bus. You can be dropping your kids off. You can be picking them up. You can be dealing with the stress of a transition. All of those moments, these are times when you can use this. Okay, so the first is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory grounding technique. And again, you can use it anytime. Some examples here: exams, social situations, performance anxiety. So, how it works is you use your five senses, and first you look for five things that you can see around you. Then you touch four things you can feel or touch, name them in your mind. If you're by yourself, you can, of course, do it out loud. Listen for three things you can hear, smell two things, and one thing you can taste. So, we're going to walk through that together. I'll prompt each of those things so you can remember which one you're supposed to be doing. And I'll give you 30 seconds or so between each thing that we're naming for you to practice that grounding technique. So first, take a deep breath. Maybe roll your shoulders back. Look around you for five things you can see. And I'll just give some examples. Around me, I've got a tissue that I can see. I can see a door. I can see my water bottle here. I can see the wall and I can see some light coming in through the window. Now, touch four things you can feel or touch. So I can feel my own fingers, my palms squeezing. I can feel my breath. I can feel the mat underneath my feet. I can feel the chair that I'm sitting on. And take another deep breath. And listen for three things you can hear. I hear footsteps upstairs in the house I'm in. I hear my own voice as I'm doing this webinar. And I hear some voices outside. Smell two things you can smell. I'm downstairs in my home, so I can smell a little bit of the like stale basement air. And I can smell some shampoo. And one thing you can taste. I just took a drink of my water, which I've had electrolyte mixes in off and on, so I can taste a little bit of that residue. And take another deep breath. And again, you can kind of roll your shoulders around as you're doing this. Um, okay, and so some questions I've gotten previously when I've done this grounding exercise with clients is like, what if I can't find all those things? Like what if I'm in a situation where I'm like, I can't come up with five things I can see, or the big one is two things I can smell, or I'm like, I just taste my mouth. That's fine. The goal of this is to really help you be present in the moment where you're at. Don't stress too much about the intricate details of it. Allow yourself to take breaths between each one. Allow yourself to do it slowly if you want to. I can see that we had a couple of comments coming in about this. I learned the sensory grounding technique this past spring when I was experiencing a lot of anxiety as a teacher. It really helped me get out of panic state of mind. I love that. Yes. I think this one is really special because it doesn't force you into like trying to breathe while your brain is still moving a lot. It really distracts your brain. It does some of that like pulling down your frontal lobe because you're kind of forcing it to pay attention to some of the things outside of the anxiety that you're immediately experiencing. Even using these two things together can be incredibly helpful because you're starting with the sensory grounding, you're paying attention to your senses, and then you can move into breathing. And then we also have my daughter is going to be a senior. She recently had some severe anxiety, and this technique helped her too. Absolutely. It gets your brain out of fight or flight mode. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. It's wonderful comments, Marie. Okay, so now we're going to do box breathing. Box breathing is you can kind of envision like a little box in your mind. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a deep breath in. You can breathe in for any number of seconds. I usually do 3 to 5 seconds. And you'll breathe in for 3 to 5 seconds. You'll hold the breath. You'll release. You'll breathe in, hold, release, hold. So breathe in for 3 seconds. Hold for 3 seconds. Release. And then repeat. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Release. Hold. And you can kind of practice that for 3 minutes. So I'll actually give everyone a minute here to do it on their own without me prompting you. You can kind of do it at your own cadence and just sit here and practice it. You can put your feet on the ground if that feels comfortable for you. You can lay your hands wherever they feel comfortable. You can hold them up. You can put them on your legs. You can leave your eyes open or close them, whatever feels the most comfortable for you as you do this. All right. And then a few other coping skills that can help with building a good rhythm for your school year. These are all techniques that help with self-care. Um, I always say that self-care is more than a bubble bath. Bubble baths are great, but there are some things that I think take a little bit more drilling down, managing our routines, um, managing our bodies, building some of these wellness routines in for us that help the school year to be sustainable. So first, sleep is a non-negotiable. Sleep deprivation is going to amplify that amygdala reactivity. So that's the core of our brain here by up to 60%. So that can make academics and social stress, school, all of it significantly harder to manage. With this one, I think that it's good to take it with a grain of salt, right? Like if you're parenting, sometimes your kids are going to get you up in the middle of the night at any age, right? And you might not get the perfect night of sleep. As you're a teenager, sometimes you got homework that keeps you up late and you feel like you just got to do it. Um, and there might be nights that are imperfect amounts of sleep, and it's worse to stress about that sleep than it is to just move through the next day. And most of the time, you can do hard things on little sleep. However, you don't want that to be the routine. A one-off time of not getting great sleep is a one-off time of not getting great sleep. But building that over time and getting this kind of chronic sleep deprivation will have a much more amplified result on anxiety. Um, but allowing yourself when you have those nights and you're struggling to sleep, or you've been interrupted sleeping, or there's a lot going on, and you're up later, to let that go. Um, Something that I have heard, and there is some research on this, that like deep rest can still be very rejuvenating. So if you're laying there and you're struggling to sleep, or you have kids that struggle with that, helping them know that like, hey, deep rest can really help too. Lay there, breathe, um, do something to distract your brain for a second if you need to, read for 15 minutes, and then try and go back to sleep. Those are all things that are empirically proven to kind of help with that sleeping process. Some other things that can help with sleep, having a good routine each evening before sleeping can really help with the wind down process, and that can look something like, an hour before bedtime, or however long before bedtime you can manage it. Um, Helping your kids, if they're younger, we do a bath, or we do brushing our teeth, and then we get into the pajamas and we do some solid concentrated time reading, or some other kind of winding down activity together. And then we have the tuck in process. Having a routine like that can really help with the decompression. Um, and then another thing that, as your kids are older and managing their own routine, helping them to be self-reliant on that. What does that wind down routine look like? Removing devices from the room is another empirically proven thing to help with sleep for teenagers, for kids. And so removing any kind of electronic device, phones, that kind of thing can be helpful. Um, the myth of grinding through. So, research consistently shows that students who protect recovery time outperform those who sacrifice it more for study hours. There's actually been some really interesting research on this recently. There was a book called Spark that was written by a clinician, and focus on the science of exercise and how it impacts our brains and mental health. And so a high school in Illinois started having students do some vigorous exercise right before their hardest classes. So they structured the routine so that before their hardest classes, math, science classes, they had a physical exercise class and routine. The result was those students improved their reading and math scores by 17% within a single semester. And even more amazingly, when those same students took the International TIMSS exam, which is um, the result of math science scores around the world, they scored number one in the world in science and number six in math, which was a pretty phenomenal thing because um, there hadn't been a school in the United States scoring that high in a very long time. So movement literally primed their brains to learn. This was just a school that it was not a top performing school before this change. So um, rest, recovery, exercise are going to help more than just like grinding in additional study hours. And then social relationships. Protect relationships that make you feel seen. This is huge for students. This is huge for parents. This is huge for teachers. Figure out a relationship in the school year that's genuinely restorative, that you can connect with. Find some relationships in your family and also outside of your family, if you have those in both places, that can help you to talk through things that you're going through, where you can help each other, where you can just spend time relaxing. All right. And then Lindsay, did we have any questions on that section that came up?
So we have a more general question about
Mhm.
advice for battling perfectionism.
Mm.
Would you like that now, or shall I give it to you at the end?
Let's go ahead and jump into it now.
Great. Any advice for perfectionism? I need to keep making A's to get into the grad program when the time comes, but I get upset if I make anything less than 100 as an ADHD older college student.
That is such a great question. Um, I love this question for a couple of reasons. I think it's a very common struggle, right? Like, here's the bar, and it's an A, and here's where I want to be. Like, and then I know I'm safe, right? So that you've got a little bit of this like kind of fight or flight thing here. Like, if I get here, then I know I'm gonna make it, right? Like, I'll be able to get into this grad school program. Um, for sure that perfectionism just is tough to deal with, right? Like we want to be perfect because then no one can mess us up. We can reach those goals that we're striving for. So there's a couple of things. Some of these things are much easier said than done, but one is like considering what you can control and what you can't control. Um, Honestly, you could get 100% on every single exam and you could still not make it into your grad school program. That's a hard thing to sit with, but sometimes can be helpful when it's like, okay, what I can control is the work that I do, the study that I do, the sleep that I get, the balanced life that I'm living. Um, what I can't control is ultimately which school I get into. I can do my best, but at the end of the day, that's going to be something out of my control. The test score, you can do as much as you can, but you can't control what's on that exam. So I think like really honing in on what you can control, doing some of these things that we've talked about, the breathing routines, trying to build this balanced life, focusing on sleep as a non-negotiable, the myth of grinding through, protecting relationships that make you feel seen, building some of those sustainable habits so that you're not doing too much of this grinding through. I just have to stay up 6 more hours because then I'll be more likely to get that 100% on this exam. Um, Another thing here is as you go into the school year, maybe start setting some goals for yourself and routines around what you want to do in terms of your study. This is the routine I want to live. I want to be able to, like try and get up at this time. I want to have my classes at these times. After my classes, I want to try and study in this hour. And then I want to make sure that I'm eating dinner or like building in some sustainable times around my eating routines and my sleep routines. On any given day, I'm going to try to study 4 hours and not build in a lot more than that, especially if I'm getting to a point where it's like I've done the study and at this point, it's just cutting into my sleep. You're gonna have some days where you can't be perfect with it, right? And it's hard to let go of that when you are maybe struggling with some of these perfectionist routines. Um, but taking some of those tools and just slowly implementing them as much as you can. And then we talked a little bit about some of those cognitive behavioral therapy techniques at the beginning that you can use as a parent. What's the worry behind the worry? Use that with yourself too. Have some things you can tell yourself in those moments where you feel yourself starting to get into that perfectionist spiral. Taking a deep breath, stepping back. Okay, I have done what I can do. I've done what's in my control. I'm going to try and walk away from it now. Um, and that can be a little bit more of a reasonable approach, a little bit of like, you're not going to be able to talk yourself out of complete perfectionism. It's going to be something that you might be working on consistently, but just having some of those tools in your back pocket. Okay. And we have some things shared here. I have to leave home at 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday, Thursday. I'm not used to getting up early at all. Absolutely, the flexible summer schedule going away. I think we mentioned that at the beginning, and it's painful, right? Like losing some of that. And then there's another resource shared by Tava Webinars in the chat, an excellent resource, some other webinars for high performers, mental health, along with relevant resources. Okay, and then protecting your well-being so you can show up for theirs. This is helpful strategies for teachers, for parents, um, as you're going into this new school year. So, um, teachers are returning to the new school year, and they're not just returning. A lot of times they're returning with the emotional residue of the previous one. Um, There are students that you may still be worried about. There may be students that you're seeing again in your classes. There may be moments that have stayed with you. There may be things from multiple years you're carrying with you, and often grief for what you couldn't fix. In the clinical profession and the therapeutic profession, we call this like some vicarious trauma, where maybe you've experienced some trauma through your kids, and then there's also some compassion fatigue. And often, as you've been in the field longer, then you might hold on to that even further as you're going through the year. Those are very common experiences in helping professions. And honestly, I think they can impact parents too. When you've been working with your kids for years and years, you love them so much, you want to be there for them. Same for teachers. But it doesn't mean that there's not a large emotional weight that you're carrying along with them. There's a big emotional labor of teaching. You have to manage your own feelings while holding space for all these students that you're teaching. And it's one of the highest of any profession. So first, naming this explicitly, it's why we have this slide, is one of the first acts of self-compassion. What you're carrying into September is real. It does matter. And naming that, recognizing that teaching is a difficult profession, and that weight is very real. Okay. Again, setting a sustainable rhythm from day one. We talked about the importance of this for students, for parents, and it's also important for teachers. So, the first 2 weeks of any school year, you're going to set the emotional tone. For any teachers that are joining this, I'm sure you've got you've got ways that you've gone into school years. You have plans for your school years. One big thing that's helpful for parents, students, administrators, is going to be boundary setting. That's going to apply for teachers too. So boundary setting with your students. Here's what this class looks like. Hey, this is what communicating with me looks like, parents. This is what my expectations are as a teacher. Sometimes you're going into it with vague boundaries from all of those different parties. And so setting your own can be very helpful. Much more easy than recalibrating mid-year. That's also going to be true for parents. Parents with your kids, setting those boundaries in the first couple of weeks when emotions are highest is going to be more helpful than trying to recalibrate mid-year. Students, same for you. As you're able to kind of set your routine at the beginning of the year, then it helps get going with a sustainable rhythm. So some examples might be maybe you have a defined after-hours communication window. This is the period of time I'm willing to be online, answering questions, responding to emails. I'm going to get off afterwards. Having a brief decompression ritual between school and home that allows you to kind of disconnect from some of the things you experience during the school day, if possible. Maybe you have a lunch break every week that you really protect as genuinely uninterrupted and don't allow things to get scheduled through it, meetings to get scheduled through it, meetings with teachers, parents, administrators, students, all those things. Supporting students with anxiety without taking it on. Teachers are not therapists, but you're often the first to notice when a student is struggling. It's worth noticing for and noting for a student that persistent avoidance of participation, physical complaints. Again, we talked a little bit about how anxiety can impact, like maybe you have a headache or maybe you have a stomach ache. If there's behavioral changes that you're noticing, if you've seen them year to year, and then withdrawal from peers. And then one of the most powerful things you can do as a teacher is to offer a judgment-free, consistent presence. There's a lot of research showing that those adult relationships in school can significantly impact the buffer of childhood stress and adversity. It's something that we see in the counseling field as well. A lot of times, empathy is going to be the highest indicator of student success and child success, more than anything else you can do. And so that can be something that you can hold on to in those moments where you're dealing with the difficult student relationships. Preventing burnout. So teacher burnout, we talked about how compassion can fatigue can be huge in this field. Teacher burnout typically follows an arc. You might feel overextended in September and October. You're getting into a new school year. There's lots of expectations. You're building this curriculum. By November, you're exhausted. And then by spring, it's easy to feel disengaged. Recognizing that this cycle can happen, that it can happen to you, no matter how excellent of a teacher you are, can be very helpful in interrupting it. And then we've got this classic example, oxygen masks on a plane. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot breathe if you're giving oxygen masks to everyone else around you first. First, you have to put on your oxygen mask, and then you can protect those around you. Helping yourself believe that, understand that can give you the permission to set some of those boundaries. I'm sure there's teachers listening to this who might be like, "Oh my gosh, how am I ever going to protect one lunch a week?" I hear you. That kind of thing can be very difficult in these very demanding professions. And so recognizing that this can help you actually do the rest of your job better, be there for students, where you can set those boundaries. And we have an optional poll here, so we'll give 30 seconds or so for this. In the chat, tell us a little bit as you've gone through this presentation, which feels most true for you as you head into the school year. A, I'm feeling energized and optimistic. B, I'm cautiously optimistic but a little anxious. I'm already tired and it hasn't started yet. I'm not sure. It depends on the day. All right, we're getting a combination. We've got a lot of Bs, a lot of folks feeling cautiously optimistic but a little anxious. Already tired, it hasn't started yet. Oh, taking summer classes. Yeah, you didn't really get the break, right? Um, Again, a lot of Bs. We've got a couple of As. I'm feeling energized and ready. Great. And then I'm not sure, it depends on the day. Absolutely. Across the board, we've got people feeling different things. And I think that's all in the realms of normal. And again, D, I think can be very true. You might feel A sometimes, but you got more sleep that night. You're excited, you're energized, you're ready. You've had a good summer vacation. Maybe another day you're feeling more tired, and then you've got some anxiety coming in too. And then finally, building bridges. Um, I want to emphasize how important it is to normalize mental health conversations. For parents, it's okay to tell your children it's okay to not feel okay. For teachers, I see your child. If something seems off, I promise I'll communicate with you. For students, remember that the adults in your life are also figuring it out. You're not a burden for having needs. They are there for you, and they are also experiencing emotions too. We do have some resources from Tava. So this is our back to school toolkit. You can scan this link here. This is a great back to school toolkit for parents. There's also resources that will be useful for students and for teachers. So please pull out your phone. You can scan this. We'll have this ready for you as well. You can grab it and take it with you. And then finally, we'll wrap up with questions. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just leave it on this slide before so that you can grab any back to school toolkit. And Lindsay, did we have any questions come in here at the end?
We have answered them as they've come in, so we are good to wrap it up.
Amazing. All right. And so finally, it's okay to go into the school year feeling like things might be difficult, to feel a little anxious. Resilience isn't the absence of feeling anxious or hardship. It's what you do with it. So if you have any additional questions, if you could benefit from Tava, ask your HR team about your Tava benefit. If you have it, you can visit tavahealth.com at any time. There's a lot of resources out there as well on our pages and blog posts, aside from the back to school toolkit we shared. Thank you all
Wonderful.
for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Ariana. This was great. I know that I'm taking away a lot of practical tools here, and I really do appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who spent a little bit of their day with us, and I also hope to see all of you on future webinars. So have a wonderful rest of your day, regardless of what time it is where you are, and we will see you soon. Cheers.